as of this recording, it's already been a week since whatever the hell that was in the NBA Finals from Wembenyama and the Spurs. So therefore, but I'm not here to talk about that and how, we didn't even have a legitimate shot, but even though we led with the majority of the games with a big lead, more than the Knicks did. Outside of game three, where that's the only one we won, and yet we still found a way to lose, considering, Harper's the only one who really, really wanted it. Like, he wanted to win the championship. And, the whole De'Aaron Fox, debacle and be amongst fans, basically, these couch coaches. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I am here to talk about, I don't want to mess with this tradition because I really don't want to we'll skip out on it this year, because ever since we started becoming a content creator during the COVID years, on my social media platform, the pandemic year in 2020, and then later the vaccine year in 2021, and then the first of the post-COVID years, 2022 to present, we've done this each and every year after every Spurs season since, the beginning of the rebuild, the first of four pre-Wembenyama years, and then, the first two Wembenyama years, rookie Wemby and then sophomore Wemby, before the blood clot came in, had other plans and cut his season short, which is the only reason why Mickey Mouse Mobley fluked his way to that fake-ass Defensive Player of the Year. Otherwise, Wembenyama would have two consecutive Defensive Player of the Years. But yeah, I mean, every, season in review video has always been on the negative side of things, where, things were abysmal. Considering 2020, we just did it on, Instagram, after, the season finale in the bubble, where our playoff streak already ended before our season finale even began, because, whatever help we needed from other teams to try to, keep that quote unquote playoff streak alive didn't come. It was the exact opposite. But me being just turning 26 right before the pandemic, basically the weekend of the Daytona 500 when the near fatal Ryan Newman wreck happened, I said, let's just finish out the season anyway. And as much as I didn't like Weatherspoon, that, failed, experiment in San Antonio that later went to get his championship in Golden State 2 years later in the first post-COVID year, which he kind of redeemed himself. He did get injured in the first half of that, said game, but things were already rough as it is a Spurs fan, and, life in general with, not me, because I'd be being selfish if I said it was me. It was for all of us, because that was such a weird year, let alone a weird time. So after the first half, I just shut the damn thing off, closed up the bunker, went outside and took a walk. So therefore, and then when, we started, making our full-time return to YouTube, a week before my Kirk Summerton 27th birthday, at the start of the vaccine year, that's when we started doing Spurs game reviews on there. And then, I'm actually commentating these Spurs games on TikTok, which has been a tradition every year, even when things were abysmal. And then later NASCAR races, starting with the Daytona 500, the COVID vaccine Daytona 500 day before that said birthday of mine that really didn't get done to that said birthday started, because, it was raining for after that, gigantic-sized big one that took out almost over half the field, and literally why I was ranked among the top three, the Mount Rushmore worst Daytona 500s of all time, alongside 2000 and 2013. Gee, I wonder what's going to be the fourth one to complete the whole ass Mount Rushmore of worst Daytona 500s of all time, considering, during that rain delay, the Spurs were playing the Hornets, and it was the last time the Spurs won in Charlotte, and we spent the whole rain delay watching that game, killing time, and then right as the game ended, the Spurs took the win. They said, drivers to your cars, and then the race resumed and then didn't get done until I finally turned 27. They were still racing for the Harley JL trophy right as my birthday started, so therefore, that was when we started doing this video as per tradition, that we wasted a playing spot in 2021 and 22. That's when we did, this video. The only season we didn't do this video was the 2022-23 season, which after, the frustrations of 2021 and 2022, I knew we were going to be the worst of the worst. So that's why I took that whole season outside of one game, quote unquote, my tradition juice, the one against the Cavs here in Ohio. That one, my dad already bought the tickets before I made this decision to pull the plug on that entire season to get myself away from the abundance of anger and frustration I was feeling with the team, considering I was at a breaking point where I needed a break. But that's like the only game I touched, the only Spurs content I provided because, my dad and apparently my mom, who ended up taking me in the end instead of my dad for whatever reason, didn't want, to mess with tradition. It was more their call to not mess with tradition, not mine. I could have cared less if we didn't go to that one, but we still did. Otherwise, I would not have met Beth Regali like I did. So even when things aren't the brightest, everything happens for a reason. So that was the year we tanked to get Wemby. I mean, we saw Wemby's first game at home against the Mavericks, which was a loss considering, every single year, it seems like in recent memory, it's always been Mavericks Spurs to open up the Spurs season, whether it's in San Antonio at SBC or Dallas at American Airlines. I have to figure out the difference between American Airlines. I think the Mavericks Stadium still uses, American Airlines, but I don't know if it's arena or center because I know Miami retired the American Airlines, name in their arena, but I still use that one. I still use that name. I just gotta remember the difference because it's so fucking confusing. But yeah, I mean, I know our first, season in review video with rookie Wemby. That was more of a positive one because even though rookie Wemby was a losing season, it sure as hell didn't feel like it at all. It just didn't because, he made every home Spurs game feel like a playoff game because he was a huge deal, a bigger deal back then compare. He's still a huge deal now, but it's kind of toned down maybe just a little bit because everybody was getting to know who he was outside of Spurs fans, whether they were in San Antonio or Spurs fans outside of San Antonio like me, or hell, even if you lived in San Antonio but didn't give a lick about basketball, even if one of the greatest franchises in NBA history, on sports history, was in the state and city you originated in, I mean, you even heard of them even in that form too, considering, it was a losing season, yeah, but it didn't feel like it, obviously, considering, we didn't make our return, make our return to the games on Wemby's rookie season, considering we were watching part-time because he was a big deal if you were a Spurs fan in or out San Antonio. When we, continue the tradition in a more meaningful way, considering we were back watching the Spurs, kind of, considering, eventually it was going to fix our problems. I mean, obviously, I knew he was not going to light the world on fire, let alone fix our problems right away. I said it would take 2-3 years, and guess what? 3 years it ended up being because, we did go to the one against the Cavs here in Ohio where he was a rookie and literally he was basically shooting us back into that game from the free throw line. And even our former player, now NBA champion with the Knicks, Sohan, almost won us the game in the most craziest way with that half-court shot, considering we didn't have any timeouts left. I mean, if you remember that game in the previous possession before Sohan had put up that desperation, I almost went in, and even there's a lot of Cavs fans I didn't even know, complete strangers around me, told me I saw my Spurs jerseys, like, yeah, dude, that was scary. Your player almost got that in the basket, and literally the soul's going to be sucked out of the Gund Arena. So they were cool with me about it, obviously. If you remember that, diehard LeBron fan that really doesn't watch basketball the whole too much anymore. He only watches it, for LeBron and literally, decided to come back, and see the team that, started his NBA career, take on rookie Wemby since he was head love for the game as well. Shout out to Mr. Shaquille Williams. I mean, get in my section basically where my dad and I were sitting all hyped up and shit. That was a fun time even though we lost, considering, what I was going to say was we had a legit chance to not have to worry about, a heave where we didn't have a timeout left, considering, but we turned the ball over in the second to last Spurs offensive possession. And then we didn't go to our next Spurs game till the version 2 in San Antonio where the crowd was in the Spurs' favor, and I felt like I fit right in. And of all people, it was against that same Mickey Mouse Cavalier team with fake Cal Petty and Mickey Mouse Mobley before Cheaty McDouchebag was there, considering, I got to boo the Cavs there, considering, since it was in San Antonio, not Cleveland, no repercussions. But that's not why my dad picked it. It just happened to be coincidentally the closest Spurs home game to my birthday before the rodeo road trip, considering, the rodeo is always in the SBC Center at my birthday, during the Daytona 500 and NBA All-Star Game. So that's why the All-Star Game has not been in San Antonio since before Duncan was there and before I was there. Dating back to when I lived on West 57th, But with the new stadium we're about to get in a few years in San Antonio, the rodeo can have its own limelight. Well, we can have the All-Star Game back in San Antonio again for the first time since I was a 2-year-old when I lived on West 57, 2 years before I showed up and before Duncan showed up, which was at the time not only the pre-Duncan Spurs, but the pre-Oliveira Spurs, that being me, Mark Anthony Oliveira, the greatest Spurs fan of all time. That's basically not the basically that's not the international, that Japanese Spurs fan. I mean, I know your name, but I can't say it for ass, so I don't know how to botch it. So shout out to you. You're literally I'll make a compromise. You're literally the greatest international Spurs fan of all time from Japan. I'm literally the greatest Spurs fan of all time from the Cavalier territory. So that's a fair compromise right there. If not, I'm the greatest Tim Duncan fan of all time, and no one can take that shit away from me. So therefore, we can have the All-Star game in San Antonio once we get the new arena, meaning we don't have to worry about conflict with the rodeo road trip, and me and my dad can finally take the trip down there, and maybe that'll get me to watch the All-Star game again for that one time, maybe on TV. I mean, in person, not on TV, obviously, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens down the line, considering, that year in review, they basically in rookie Wemby. It wasn't a negative one for once, even though it was a losing season, because, that rookie Wemby did not feel like a losing season. That was like the only losing season when things were abysmal, where it felt like a happy season, the Wemby effect in terms of, how you're feeling, not the on-court product, but your personal feelings off the court as a fan. So, therefore, it was like, we gave belt to ass to a Pistons team that was also sucking, but apparently the Pistons were sucking more in that year than we were. So, literally, that was the one, NASCAR San Antonio doubleheader where NASCAR and the Spurs were at the same time in the middle of the day. But since, the game ended before the race because at Texas, the Samsung Radio Shack 500 is down the street from where the Spurs were playing the SBC Center in that regular season finale down in Dallas-Fort Worth, where Preston Plays and Brianna Arsman Barnhart live. They just wouldn't stop crashing, and that track sucks anyway, so I just shut off the TV and just went outside since it was nice out, and my friends in Sandy Ridge and literally the outsiders that basically their friends were really honored that I gave up something I loved in the middle of the event to see them, so they were really honored that I did that for them. And then second year at Wemby, I mean, the Chris Paul effect, combined with the Wemby effect, turned our team around just a little bit. We upgraded 34 wins, but 48 losses, plus, losing Wemby to the blood clot after, only playing 46 games and then getting Swipa, considering, we'll talk more about him in a little bit, he was playing his ass off with that sore pinky, but then he made his own personal decision to pull the plug to get that pinky repaired and avoid getting further damage on it if he could do to play on it. So he did that under his own power to bet, sacrificing the season and potentially, a play-in spot we actually would have legitimately earned. That pinky not happening. If Wemby and Fox were playing in that second half of, Wemby's second season, I think we would have been lucky just to make the play-in, except we would have actually had more worth being there than, the 2021 and 22 play-in. So, but I'm kind of glad that didn't happen because, literally, we needed, a sixth rebuilding year to humble ourselves to get ready for what happened this past season in year 3 Wemby, considering that really wasn't a negative, year in review either, because that was also a win against the Raptors where we came back from down 22 to win. And, a boring-ass Food City 500 to go with it on Fox at Bristol Motor Speedway. That's why the race got done at the same time as that said game, because of the fact that race went by so quickly because of how much of a dog shit snooze fest it was. And considering it was a meaningless regular season game when the Spurs had nothing to lose or nothing to gain, so they could win or lose for all they cared. And guess what? We still found a way to win. That's why it got done so fast and not at the same time as the said race. So, therefore, that the last two Spurs year in review videos have not been negative. It's been more of a positive, but the ones before that, 2020, the COVID year on Instagram, that was a one in anger and frustration. The ones in 2021 and 22, the vaccine year and the first post-COVID era that we're in now, those were negative. We were angry and frustrated. The next 2 years after that, they were not angry and frustrated at all. I mean, losing seasons, but it was some positivity that because of the Wemby effect. Now, we fast forward to this year, so if you wouldn't want to hear me yap in the beginning of how we got here to begin with, so fast forward to this point. So, anyway, this San Antonio Spurs season, which was Wemby's third year and my 29th year aboard with this team as a fan, it was an actual phenomenon. It was the first actually legit fun one I've had since the first year Duncan stepped away in 2016-17 when I was on the literally on my last legs, full on living La Vida Labyrinth with Kelly Berglund on Disney XD. So I can't really thank this team enough for finally giving me something to be happy about for once. No matter if we would have hit a wall, but either between rounds 1 and 3, or got to the finals and, lost in humiliating fashion like we did, or actually put up a 2013 style fight and then lose in the end, even if we had a shot, actually legit shot like a 2013. All that matters is we made it, and the fact that we weren't supposed to, the people had us as lucky to be a play-in team or a low-seeded, playoff team like above the play-in, and yet we more than exceeded expectations. We're ahead of schedule. And we're just getting started. The Wemby era in San Antonio is only beginning. Next year will be my 30th anniversary as a fan. Wemby's 4th year, and yeah, I know. Fox was playing on a high ankle sprain that's been bothering him since the Minnesota series. That's why he didn't have the full 6 weeks to recover from it, because we were so far in the playoffs. Otherwise, we would have been screwed. We wouldn't have made it past OKC the way we did, even though we barely did, considering, and, coming off that hamstring injury in the beginning, he suffered towards the end of the season, so close to the beginning. No, not the end of the season, the end of the last offseason. That was also so close to the beginning of this past season. That's why he missed the first few games of the season until the Alex Trebek death anniversary game against the Pelicans and SBC Center in San Antonio. So that's why, I'm looking forward to seeing how good it'll be for a whole last season where he gets to play from start to finish. We've seen it in Sacramento when he was there. We have not seen it in San Antonio yet, considering, we only saw maybe 75% of it in San Antonio when he finally came back from the hamstring. And then we were lucky we only saw 50% of it, we did see kind of 90% of it in the whole first round, and then the pre-injury, round two pre-injury. And then we went back to seeing 50% of it. That high ankle sprain took a lot of his explosiveness. We all know him for, which is why, he got the nickname Swipe on the Fox, considering, he usually runs fast like a fox. And, Swipe is only his nickname because of the character in Dora the Explorer, who was an asshole character that was a fox, except for maybe one Dora special where he was actually the nice guy for once, where it was maybe a Dora program on Nick Jr. for those who remember, about the Swiper character's family, which is why they kind of abandoned him being an asshole for one Dora show, where he actually was only nice because he was talking about his family and stuff. But that was the Nickelodeon equivalent of Crash Bandicoot, where Cortex was evil in every single game, and so was Uka Uka, except for one, Crash Twinsanity, because the evil twins, which was Cortex's former pet parrots from the events before that said game, the most unfinished game that people got to play as a final game, was literally the greater evil than Cortex and Uka Uka himself. That's why Cortex had to abandon his original plan as to what he was about to do to Crash, team up with Crash to stop an evil greater than his and Uka Uka's from destroying the island home. So for those memories I brings back for me before I had a social media career as a creator and an influencer. So that's literally what that the Nickelodeon did with Swiper, the character on Dora the Explorer that De'Aaron Fox was nicknamed after. So literally, I was upset about how he had a horrendous series outside of Game 3, but did I ever want him gone? No. Did I want Pop fired after that mistake in Game 6 of leaving Duncan on the bench when he, literally needed to be out there for the best, get that one rebound? Did I want Ginobili traded after, a piss-poor finals that same series outside of Game 5 that we somehow still almost won? Or hell, even if he would have redeemed himself in the end by, making the 2 free throws that he took, and, if Kawhi, literally made those 2 free throws. Ray Allen's 3 wouldn't have meant a lick, considering, we would have already won the championship. And then, we go on that generational run the next year. Duncan gets his back-to-back, 6-0, ties Michael, passes Kobe. La 4-6 is, I think, La 3-7, something like that. But hell, he could have been 3-8 if, Draymond didn't get that suspension in the Living La Vida Laboratory, and Bogut did not have his injury, and then, the Mickey Mouse Cavalier dirtbag fan base, wouldn't have been such fucking assholes they were in terms of people I couldn't realize during that time period. But that is neither here or there with this video. But You know, I didn't want, Ginobili traded after that. Before Kawhi and Uncle Dennis pulled off their bullshit several years later, I didn't want him gone, after, missing the one of two free throws to ice the game. It's the NBA Finals. Shit happens. I never wanted Fox gone, obviously. So, therefore, if Ginobili and Kawhi bounce back the next year, 2014, I feel like Swipa can too. So, therefore, Dylan Harper, even Ron Harper, his dad said it himself. I'm a Harper fanboy, and I go hard for him and Carter more than Wembanyama so far. Maybe I'll go hard for Wembanyama as equally if, he, bounces back the next year. You don't demand a starting spot in the NBA when you're young and are a new hotshot rookie, let alone a young hotshot player when you hit your second season, and nor is it given. You have to earn that shit, Even Ron Harper had to speak for my homeboy, aka son Dylan, Dylan never demanded a starting spot, considering, and Dylan himself said, if Cheating McDouchebag could wait his turn, even though, considering, he's a real fraud, if anything. So many consecutive playoff appearances like Duncan, except Duncan won 5, while Harden never even won jack shit in his career in terms of, major accomplishments that Duncan has won, considering, literally, Harper can be better than that bearded cheating McDouchebag, in terms of going on the same path, where you wait your turn, and then maybe, once it's finally time to hand him the keys to be the starting point guard, then yeah, his time will come. Just let it come organically, considering, and for those on TikTok saying, oh, I hope it doesn't turn into another OKC Harden situation, bitch, please. My homeboy D Harp is not cheating McDouchebag, and hell, he has a lot more class on and off the court than cheating McDouchebag, because Harper did not get arrested, in his father's hometown of Chicago, for whatever cheating McDouchebag did in Houston. So I don't want to hear jack shit from those casuals that are going to fear that's going to become hard in OKC part 2. Like, get the fuck out of here. If Harper earns it, he earns it. He has to let it come organically, and that's what he's doing. He even admitted it himself before his rookie season started. There was a lot to be happy about this season. I'm grateful. This is the first time we reached the finals since, not only the Sandhurst House in Brook Park in 2014 when I was 20, and, my school career officially ended when I graduated my vocational school at Polaris to finish a proper 2 full years with Mr. Charnago after switching classes in the middle of 11-12 to him from the deli because I was failing in the deli. Rest in peace, Mr. Warner, even though he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed in terms of a teacher, but as a person, I'm sure he was a genuine older gentleman. But this was also the first time in my whole 11 years being in the happiest place in Northeast Ohio, we call Sandy Ridge, that my team has reached the finals. And yeah, when we reached my first finals on Sandhurst, since the first one ever since the Lenore House in Michigan, which was 6 years before that, we lost in that one. We came back the next year with my last full year on Sandhurst and won it. So we were 1-1 on Sandhurst, 1-0 in Westwood in 22nd, 3-0 in Lenore, and now we're 0-1 in Sandy Ridge. So hopefully maybe next year, maybe the next 2 years after that, maybe, who knows, we could become 1-1 or even 2-1 in Sandy Ridge in terms of, NBA Finals record, and which house is, I'm going to see a Finals appearance in my lifetime as a Spurs fan, and which house is going to give me a ring in any individual season. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But the last thing I'm going to say before I end this off in the most special way, and we need a true power forward in terms of size to, take the weight off Wemby's shoulders. Kornet cannot come off the bench and back up Wemby by himself, which is why, as a Bismack fan, I was infuriated that he and, Plumlee were not, utilized, considering, that's what they were there for, veteran leadership, but they could have picked up the slack that Kornet couldn't. But this is what I'm talking about. Look at this. This is the exact situation I'm talking about, after Robinson retired. Duncan was lucky that he had, his own Luke Kornet and, Rasho, Nazr, Fabricio, the king of fucking it up, Elson and Tiago, 5 different versions of what Wemby has with Kornet, considering, obviously Kornet doesn't start alongside him and he shouldn't, but yeah, Rasho and then later Nazr did, and then, Oberto with, Elson coming off the bench and Tiago did, considering, we need an actual power forward in terms of the size. Julian Champagnie's a power forward, yeah, but Jules is not cut to be a starting power forward with Wemby in the front court with him being at center. because he's undersized. Only like, I know his height, but I'm not fucking saying it because fuck that meme. So if you know, that piece of shit meme needs to fucking die already. We don't have to get rid of him, let him come off the bench, literally, put him at small forward, if anything, where Kornet could come off the bench at center. We have a real power forward, and maybe, we don't have to get rid of anyone, as in Bismack and Plumlee, obviously. What if we had Bismack, back up, Wemby and, Kornet and Plumlee take turns backing up whatever legit power forward we have while we move Jules, come off the bench in the small forward. And, that means we have, this is more of a personal thing, too. It's kind of a selfish thing. That's why this message you see right here, get basically, all the bigs can stay, like, Wemby, Kornet, Plumlee, and my homeboy Bismack, Kornet, Plumlee, Bismack could come off the bench, Julia could be moved to a starting small, come off the bench a small forward, a backup small forward, and then we get a true legit power forward where Wemby can still play center like he always has, and then me, kick bum-ass Olynyk off the fucking team so we could put Mills in the rafters as long as no idiot comes to San Antonio, and guess what? Decides they're going to wear the number 8 too, and I'm going to die on this hill whether the Spurs do it or not. The 8, 15, and 31 must be disallowed from ever being used in San Antonio again. Out of respect for Spurs legends, Matt Bonner in the 15, Malik Rose in the 31, and Patty Mills in the 8, and some dumbass on Facebook said Malik was a scrub. Why want whatever fucking drugs that idiot was on? Because Malik was not a scrub. He was more of an all-time great for us for being in a ring in San Antonio. He not only won 2 rings with us, but, considering he was here for almost as long as, in terms of average amount of years spent with the Spurs uniform as Bonner from 06 to 16, Patty from 2012 to 2021, and Malik from 97 to 05. So get the fuck out of here when you say Malik Rose is a scrub. That would be like saying Bonner and Mills themselves are scrubs, because no, they had a bigger impact with the Spurs more than, Oberto, Mohammed, Nesterovic, and Elson did. I mean, the only one that comes close to being the opposite of that in terms of Bonner, Rose, and Mills is Splitter. But he wasn't here long enough to get his number 22 retired, so I could care less if anyone takes the 22 nowadays. But the 15, 8, and 31 must be discontinued permanently long enough for them to go in the rafters under Bonner, Rose, and Mills, where they belong, if they can get discontinued for a long enough period of time in order for that to happen. But, the R.C. Buford, the Holtz, Mitch Johnson, Brian Wright, and Pop in the front office when it comes to that category will never fucking learn. Considering that was very disrespectful of KBD to take Malik's number when he did. Kind of like how it was disrespectful for Aldridge to take Bowen's number, considering Bowen was kind of disrespecting himself by letting that imposter and in his number use it, to keep his identity in Portland. Which I get, he had the 12 in Portland, want to keep that identity. Why did he wanted to keep it in San Antonio? I don't know, considering he played college basically in the state of Texas, where the Spurs, Rockets, and Mavs are. So literally, considering he had the 23. I mean, if he had the 23, I would have had more respect for him as a Spurs great, where I would have included him as a Spurs great for how long he was here, and maybe had like a somewhat of an impact, even though he didn't even do shit, even if he didn't even win anything here. But even if that was the case with the 23, I would have respected him more. Unfortunately, though, he didn't do that, and I found it disrespectful for Weatherspoon, even though he redeemed himself at Golden State with Curry by winning a championship, Wieskamp and Bouye for taking Bonner's number, and I did not respect Olynyk for taking Mills' number. I found that downright disrespectful to those two. And Olynyk, I would have had more respect if he would have pulled a Shaq Miami and said, I know number 33 is my personal number, but that's Zoe's number here in Miami, so I know he's coming back, so I'm not going to take it, so I'm going to take my Orlando number 32. So if Olynyk had done that and said, I want the 8, I know remember with the 8 in it, but I don't want to take Mills' number because I want San Antonio to put him in the rafters. So guess what? I'll just take the 88. So I would have had more respect if Olynyk did that like Shaq did with Zoe and Miami, but unfortunately, he didn't do that either. So what can you do? So that's pretty much all we need to do to have a legitimate shot next year, but even better considering this finals loss will feel a lot. So thank you everyone for sticking with me through the first good Spurs season since 2016-17. We will be back with more Spurs content in terms of the on-court product in October 2026 when we get towards the end of season season 6 of Adventures in Autumn, when we're getting ready for the Sandy Ridge finale around Halloween time for what will be my 30th anniversary as a fan. Have a good night tonight and a better day tomorrow. Take care, everyone. Good night, and I'll see you all for the next video, which will be the NASCAR race review from, recapping the inaugural Winston Cup race at San Diego. But as far as the San Antonio stuff goes, year 29 complete, year 30 loading. Oliveris out. See you later, everyone.
Yeah! Dale, 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 2-1-0. Dale, 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 2-1-0. Dale, 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 2-1-0. Dale, 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 2-1-0. Go Spurs, go Wemby, swipe on the fox.